Okay, I wasn't sure if I was leading this one or not. I don't remember from last year. But I do see other counselors. I know I am Counselor Joe, Counselor Green, Counselor Hogan. I'm on my phone, so it's going to take a while to look at everybody. President Hudson and Counselor Bay. And I see we have Caitlin, and I'm assuming some of her board members on the call as well. So we can go ahead and start with Caitlin.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'm here representing the Land Bank, and it looks like Jonathan Link Logan and Nancy Quigg from my board of directors are also here, and Pat is both on the council and the chair of our board. So I'll launch right into it. It's my understanding that the budget the mayor has proposed includes $500,000 for the land bank. We had requested significantly more than that, but I suspect that maybe some other funds will be coming out of the federal funding that hasn't been allocated yet. But we requested money for three things: for the demolition of blighted buildings, for renovation and stabilization of buildings, and for property maintenance expenses. Property maintenance expenses are really what drives our annual operating deficit. And as I mentioned when we were here recently giving our annual report, we really need about $750,000 of financial support from the city, the county, or other sources between now and June 30th of 2022, the end of your next fiscal year, for the land bank to remain solvent. We run a significant operating deficit every year, and it's primarily driven by property maintenance costs. In previous years, the city has contributed about $250,000 a year towards property maintenance costs, and that helps us shrink our deficit a little bit, but not completely, because last year we ran a deficit of $840,000. And so we have to dip into our fund balance to cover that expense. We're projecting we only have enough fund balance and unrestricted cash available to cover those deficits through the end of September this year, unless we make significant changes to our day-to-day operations and cut maintenance costs. We don't want to do that because we hear feedback from a lot of community groups and elected officials that we're doing kind of the bare minimum now to keep these properties mowed, to keep the sidewalks shoveled, pick up trash and debris, board them when they've been broken into, and those types of things. So we really do need financial support from the city to keep meeting those day-to-day maintenance obligations and remain financially solvent. The land bank generates a lot of financial benefits for the city and the county. By taking the tax foreclosed properties, we make the city a better collector of delinquent taxes. We estimate that the city has collected, I want to say, over $19 million since the land bank was established, above and beyond historical collection levels. That benefits the city, and the county has a corresponding increase in the collection of delinquent receivables. So that benefits the county. When we take these properties, we are now responsible for maintaining them. We do that at a lower unit cost than the city did historically. So when it's sitting on the seizable list, if the owner is not mowing the lawn or picking up the trash, the city cites them for that, and then they go out and provide the service and bill the property owner. Well, if they're not paying their taxes, they're also not going to pay those bills. And so that was a cost that was previously the city's responsibility. After the property gets foreclosed on and conveyed to the land bank, we bear that cost, and we're able to do it more cost effectively than the city has historically. So paying us to do it is cheaper for you. Then, we generate revenue through the sale of real estate, and that's the one way that we generate unrestricted revenue to help cover our day-to-day operating costs. And then after we sell properties, those properties go back on the tax rolls. We're generating, we're estimating that the properties we've sold so far, which is about 1,033 properties, those are paying about $1.6 million a year in local property taxes. So there's 4 ways that we generate economic benefit there, and 3 of those are not captured by the land bank. That benefit flows to the city and the county, and not to us. So that's why we need financial support from the city and the county to keep going and keep generating those benefits. Now it's my hope that we could use these funds that are allocated in the city's budget for that purpose, for property maintenance expenses, and very much my hope that this federal money that hasn't been allocated yet, that a large chunk of that will go to help us catch up with demolitions and with stabilizations and renovations. But I guess that's kind of a separate issue because it's not part of this line item. Anything that I'm failing to mention, Pat?
I think we've already presented a couple different times before, and I think you're very thorough, as you always are, Caitlin.
Caitlin, was the 750,000 that you mentioned, would that be in addition to the 500,000?
No, that was what we were asking for, and 500,000 is what was put in the budget.
Okay, gotcha.
Now,
so how do you plan on making up the $250,000?
Well, the good news is, with all this federal money flowing into the city and the county, a big chunk of that is getting passed on to us to do demolitions and hopefully some additional money for stabilizations. And we do earn an admin fee on that work. So, you know, we just got a contract for $513,000 of the CDBG CARES money to go out and demolish houses that are going to be replaced with R&I new builds. And with a 10% admin fee on that, that'll be $51,000 of unrestricted income. So if we can line up a handful of contracts like that, we can fill in the gap.
And how many demos are you going to be able to do with that amount?
I'm estimating we'll get about 21 demos done with that, but let me check the exact number here. The one thing that I'm a little bit unsure about, we are anticipating that later this summer, the city's going to foreclose on that large brick building at the corner of Delaware and Grace. And you probably know the building. It's been falling apart for many years now. The roof is caving in. But we could get 19 quote unquote regular houses done with this money. Or it might be strategic to hold back a large chunk in anticipation of getting that building, because it's going to be a large and expensive demolition, and I don't want to be caught without the resources we need to deal with it. So that's a possibility. We'll either do 19 houses or we'll have to, you know, plan on addressing this one large building. We're going to be putting out 15 of these out to bid here pretty soon, and we'll also be bidding out that brick building just so that we know what cost we can anticipate, and then we'll plan accordingly.
So I was curious, I was going to actually call you the other day about this, but I know you guys are doing, well, not you guys, but there's 2 demos that's happening right now on my street. Actually, there's 2 properties, but 1 demo is happening right now, but the one next door needs to come down as well. So why don't they tear them down at the same time? Because it seems like it's a waste of time, money, and resources to have to come right back.
Yeah, so a funny thing happened with those houses. There's actually 3 homes, the 2 right next to each other, and then 1 on the 300 block that need to be demolished. And we put a bundle of 11 properties out to bid maybe 2 months ago, planning to use county CARES money for those demolitions. Those are all homes that are going to be replaced with R&I new builds as well. And I was hoping that because many of them were right next to each other, that the costs would be lower and we could get all 11 houses done. But there was only enough money to do 9 of the 11. And the way we bid them, the contractors can say, you know, we'll bid X price per house, but we'll give you a discount of Y% if you give us the whole bundle. Well, nobody was going to get the whole bundle because we could only afford to do 9 houses. So we gave each house to the lowest bidder. And it just so happened that Crisafulli was the low bidder on 1, Sessler was the low bidder on the one next door, and Scanlon was the low bidder on the one on the 300 block. So we are getting the best possible price this way, but I can see why it seems a little illogical. And they all said too, gee, why didn't you give me both of them next door to each other? And I said, well, gee, why didn't you bid lower?
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that. All right. Were you finished for your presentation?
Yes, I'm eager to hear your questions.
So we can open it up to questions. I don't know if Councilor Hogan, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
You know, my usual, at first I was a critic of the land bank, and then I grew to love the land bank. That's basically a story. It's sort of a story of romance, I guess, Councilor Allen. It's what you basically can say. I was just listing all the houses in my 2nd council district, maybe over the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, that I have that the land bank's been involved in, that usually addressing neighborhood blight or neighborhood revitalization. Couple of them are very interesting, very problematic houses, and of course, Caitlin just mentioned Delaware and Grace, which is just no other. I can't imagine any other vehicle in my time with the city of Syracuse being able to take on that and maybe come to a good resolution on that. It's a huge, beat up behemoth of a building that's dilapidated and forlorn. But I also wanted to mention the three houses on North Albert Street that where we're working with Hope Print to revitalize that neighborhood. And they've just taken those three houses over, and they're going to have probably end up with new Americans living in them. I have a real problem house up here on Avery Avenue that's just a blight on the neighborhood. I mean, all these things, it's a catch-all vehicle for almost every problem as far as a city councilor faces as far as with housing and neighborhoods go. So, and I think sometimes because of the way the land bank was put together, we don't realize that all the money that the land bank brings in, when you put 1,000 properties back on the tax rolls, that creates almost $20 million in revenue. Yet the land bank comes to us for like $500,000 a year, $750,000 a year. I mean, all that's unrealized. That's revenue we never would have realized without the land bank. Plus, we wouldn't have had 500 other houses demolished and lots ready to maybe repopulate with new housing. So, I'm a big fan, and they're a great partner to have. So, that's all I got, Councilor Allen.
I should just add that this funding we're asking for meets a short-term need, but I do agree wholeheartedly with what Councilor Bay mentioned a few weeks ago, that we do need to figure out a more sustainable solution for these annual operating deficits.
Any questions or comments from the other councilors?
I had a quick one, Councilor Allen, if that's all right.
Okay, Councilor Driscoll.
Yeah, Caitlin, so you mentioned there was the three, sorry, refresh me again. So there was the maintenance costs, there was demolitions, and what was the other big bucket you mentioned?
Stabilization and renovation.
Okay. And that's kind of transitioning properties from the state they're in to more stable home ownership type places. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done a lot of that work since the land bank was established 9 years ago. Mostly we sell homes in as-is condition, but we've sold off most of the best building stock. And what we're left with is a lot of stuff that will cost more to renovate than it'll be worth when it's done. And last year we did a pilot program, partly funded by the county and partly funded by the Community Foundation, where we did roofs, windows, and siding on rehab candidates, and then sold them for the buyers to finish the interior work. And that can be about $40,000 worth of cost just on the exterior shell before you even start your electrical and plumbing and everything. And reducing the buyer's total renovation cost was really helpful in those cases. And we'd like to do more of that because people are finding that our homes just cost too much to renovate.
So I guess if of this proposed 750 that you were hoping for, how much would go into each of the three separate buckets? And should you and say that was doubled, say you had 100 and you had 1.5 million or something, which of the three buckets do you feel is the most if you had more to spend, what would be the more priority area?
Well, we had actually requested 3 times as much, 2.25 million. So 750 was for property maintenance costs. If we don't figure out a way to pay for that, the land bank's going to run out of money and go bankrupt. So that's the most urgent problem. Then after that is demolitions. These homes have just been sitting around for a long time. They're continuing to be a blight on the neighbors, driving down people's property values, and nobody's asking us, to sell them to them. They're homes that nobody wants. And eventually we got to get rid of those. And so we asked for $750,000 for demos, but I did say in that letter, if more funding is available because of this federal windfall, we could certainly do more. We have 220 demolition candidates in our inventory. We could spend about $7 million on demos, just catching up on that backlog. I think we could probably do, we can't do that many demos in 1 year. There just aren't enough demo contractors out there. But I think we could completely catch up on that backlog over a 2 or 3 year period. And then the next step that we would like to do is this, stabilization and renovation work. I should mention, I know with this federal money that's coming in, and again, that's not the line item we're here to talk about, but whatever, I'm fixated on this problem. There is a timeline in which the city has to spend it. And in addition to stabilizing surrounding property values and just making neighborhoods look better, demolitions are a quick way to deploy those dollars. If we're looking to spend it down as quickly as possible, we can demo a house in about 2 days to do those shells that we're talking about, which is also very beneficial to the neighborhood, but it takes about 2 weeks of labor to get that done. So we can spend the demo dollars faster. So
How
to your
many of
question
those?
about
How many of those have you done? The like the shell renovations. I seen one over on Bell Ave, I believe, where it's like the siding was redone.
Yep, and that one's going to be closing next week. A gentleman that lives across the street is buying it. He's a contractor, and he's going to finish out the interior. We've only been able to do 11 of those with the grant funding that we've received so far.
All right. Any other questions?
I guess my other question, Caitlin, was kind of so the maintenance type stuff. Is there a cap on that? Like, you know, I guess like you were saying, you know, you have all these properties to demo. Is there a cap with maintenance where if you got to a certain level, you'd be absolutely, you know, all lawns would be mowed, all bushes would be trimmed.
Right.
You know what I mean? I guess I'm just trying to figure out what that is, how deep, how much deeper the hole is, or you know, how much more could go towards that, and you know, how much is satisfactory, and how much would be ideal world you would have everything you need.
So it costs us about $2 million a year to keep the land bank running. And that's not counting any capital expenses like demos or renovations. That's just payroll and maintenance and insurance on the properties. But I would say probably 1.4 of that is property maintenance and insurance. So the 750 would help us to plug a hole in our budget because we cover a lot of that with the sale of property. So we don't need to entirely rely on the city to cover those costs because we cover about half of it ourselves through sales. But I guess you raise a good point. We could always spend more. Right now, we're doing enough to keep ahead of code enforcement and maintain a good relationship with them. But we could mow the lawns more frequently. We could go do litter pickups more frequently, and I think that would make a lot of neighbors happy. We're always trying to walk a fine line and balance what's a responsible use of these public dollars. We don't want to overspend because our goal is to keep them safe and healthy and stable and get them back into the hands of responsible property owners as quickly as we can. Another reason why I'm so excited about this Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative project is because once all these homes are built, that'll take about 200 to 220 properties off our inventory and shrink our monthly maintenance costs.
Thank you.
And one other thing, if I could, Councilor Allen and Councilor Driscoll's questions, which were right on target. Before the land bank, there was no solution to those problems. The grass could go as high as to allow a Bengal tiger to hide in the grass of some of these houses. I mean, there was no solution. People would call city councilors, and we would try to beg city departments to address those problems. There was no solution at all until the land bank. And at least now the land bank and as grass cutting, everything the land bank does is bid out. We go through processes and we usually go with the lowest bidder, who does the most effective, who offers us the best price for any kind of operation they take on. So
I should mention, I think it was just in March, our board voted on hiring lawn mowing contractors for this year, and we hired 3 MBE companies that are all based in the city. And generally, the companies that we're hiring for that sort of day-to-day maintenance are either minority-owned or women-owned businesses.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Councilor Allen, I got a couple of questions. May I?
Okay, go ahead. Yep. Of course.
So Kaylin, help a freshman here. What you said you have about you sold about 1,000 properties.
Yes, over about a 9-year period.
Okay. My question is, what's what's the cause of that transaction with the city? Does the city spend anything to get it from point A to U?
The city is spending money by paying a title company to do a title search for each of the foreclosures that you do. The city has foreclosed on over 1,800 properties so far and conveyed them to the land bank. So it's during the foreclosure process that you guys are spending money on the title companies. But then when the land bank acquires those from the city, we reimburse you for that cost. So you pay $150 for the title search, we pay you $151 for the property. There are probably properties where you're doing title searches and then somebody comes in and they pay the taxes. So in that case, we're not reimbursing you for that title search, but you're getting more than $150 when they pay their taxes, so it still benefits you.
Okay. And you said based on the contract that you have, it's about $500,000, and you said that contract is going to help with the demolition of about 21 properties. Did I catch that right?
Yes, so we recently received a contract from Neighborhood and Business Development for $513 of the CARES funding that the federal government gave the city last year. It runs through CDBG for COVID response. And so we're able to use that for demolition of blighted homes that are going to be replaced with affordable housing. So we have to be careful to make sure that we're selecting properties that will be replaced with a new affordable housing development. But with the Resurgent Neighborhood Initiative plan in the works, there are a lot of sites like that where we know that affordable housing is going to be developed. So that is federal money that's separate from the $500,000 line item in the proposed budget that we're hoping we could use for property maintenance costs.
So it costs about what, 24,000 to do a demo on average, right?
It's averaging us around $27,000 a house lately. But then there are every now and then these great big ones, like I mentioned at Grayson, Delaware, that we have to plan for.
Okay, so I guess with that is with the list of properties that are currently eligible for demolition, how many do you think is a good number for you a year to really get these, you know?
Mm-hmm. So it's funny, we've had about 220 to 250 demolition candidates in our inventory for many, many years now. Every year we catch up on a bunch of demolitions, but then the city gives us more foreclosures and that includes more demolition candidates. So our backlog isn't going down. We have done anywhere between 30 and 80 demolitions a year, depending on how much grant funding is available. And we've historically relied a lot on the funding we got from the AG's office. They reached these settlement agreements with banks that were acting inappropriately during the financial crisis and directed a lot of that money to the land banks. And because we have so many shovel-ready projects, this has worked out really well. I know over the years, a lot of people ask, why does the city continue to foreclose and give more properties to the land bank when they don't have enough money to catch up on the backlog of demos? But by having title to those, we can go to grant funders and say, you know, if you give us $2 million now, we can start work immediately. Whereas a lot of the other land banks throughout the state will say, yeah, we need some money for demos, but it's going to take a year for our municipality to complete the foreclosures, so we can't actually start work until a year from now. And we've brought more of those AG settlement dollars back home to Syracuse than any other land bank in New York State. So that has been successful, but I'm sure that everyone is frustrated that our backlog is not shrinking because we're not catching up. But I think we have an opportunity to do so. And if the funding was available, we could catch up over 2 to 3 years, but it would probably take about $6 or $7 million.
So about you said 30 to 80 properties a year for demolition based on the budget that you have.
That's what we've done historically, but it varies widely depending on how much grant funding is available in that particular year. We do as many as we can afford to with the grant funds that are limited to demolitions. We could probably do 120 a year if we had the funding for it.
Okay, thank you. What about the stabilization that you spoke about regarding Councilor Driscoll's question? What do you do in that?
We've only done 11 of those so far because there was a pilot program funded by the county and by the Community Foundation. But I think that we could do at least 30 a year if there was funding available. And that would help our buyers by reducing their total cost of renovations and making these projects more realistic. We may have a case where the renovation is going to cost 140, but the property is only going to be worth 110 when they're done. If we cover $40,000 of that cost, now that makes financial sense for a private buyer to take on.
Thank you.
You're all set, Councilman Joe? Okay, I'm assuming so. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. I guess we can go ahead and close out this meeting. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Councilor Hogan, for your input. And that is all for this meeting.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
you're welcome.
Councilor Allen, Councilor Driscoll, Councilor Majuk.
All right,
Rich,
thank you, guys.